Thank you, Michael. And I just want to thank you for putting me on the cover of your publication, Arizona Business Magazine. I've got to say, I've gotten more of a positive reaction from that than just about anything that I could think of, to the point where when I go to Starbucks, they actually recognize me. I don't even have to tell them my name. You have a fantastic publication. We appreciate what you do to get the word out in the community of what different leaders are doing. It's terrific to be at Grand Canyon University. I agree with the dean. This is going to continue to be one of the great stories in the state of Arizona. Much more important than anything that I'm going to say today, I would really recommend that you take a tour of the campus. I had the opportunity to do that about a year ago. It's spectacular. Beautiful campus, very important mission. And before I get into the guts of what I'm going to say, what happens here at Grand Canyon University is very important. We'll hear from different business leaders from every sector, and they'll say you can have the best tax and regulatory environment, but if we're not preparing students for the workforce, it's all for naught. And the good work here at Grand Canyon University definitely helps us in terms of getting a qualified workforce. And I guess I'm right in the middle of the PowerPoint. But what I'm going to do today is get into the nuts and bolts of what the State Chamber of Commerce does. And I'll close it. I'll go over a few different things: my background, who we are, what we do, some of our accomplishments, challenges of the job, benefits of chamber membership. I'll end with a quote that really sort of captures why we do what we do, and then I'll open it up for any questions and answers you may have. What the chamber really is, we're set up a lot like the U.S. Chamber is on the state level. Our focus is on putting together great public policy, whether it's on education, tax policy, transportation, regulatory reform, all the things we need to have a great state. Does policy matter? I would look at California. Pretty nice state. It does matter. And you have a state where businesses are emptying out. Why? They've made a series of very poor policy decisions. Not because of the weather, it's because of man-made bad policy decisions. What we do at the State Chamber is we work with groups and businesses and like-minded individuals throughout the state to make sure that this is an attractive state to do business, and I'm glad to report we're making a lot of progress. In terms of, for me to get into this position, because it is very policy oriented with also some dabbling in the political side. One of the great things about the state of Arizona that doesn't exist, really doesn't exist in other states, particularly from states like New York, where I grew up, is that you could come here from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, start from scratch and make something of yourself. This is a place that's based on merit. I'm just curious. I like asking this question. My friend at the Business Journal always asks this question. I'm just curious, how many native Arizonans are there here today? Yeah, that's about, so about 10 or so percent. That's about average. And I think probably every non-native Arizonan would agree that they probably haven't been at a disadvantage coming to this state. One of our great things. So, grew up in New York, went to Cornell, 4th at Winters. Enough was enough. Came out here when I was looking at law schools. Fell in love with the Phoenix/Tempe, Arizona area. While at law school, did a lot of different for a lot of. I don't think it's different for someone in my role as opposed to someone who works for a business organization and marketing. Internships played a very key role. And while at law school, I probably put more time in internships with Governor Simonton's office. Maria Beyer who runs the state land department, was my boss. I interned with Jim Colby, did a bunch of things. Eventually wound up on the John Kyle for Senate campaign in 1994, and wound up in D.C. Internships. One of the things that I've tried to do at the chamber is make sure that we have a good stream of young people who are going to different schools, and certainly Grand Canyon would qualify that could come, and if they have an interest in public policy, can learn the system from where we are. Took a 10-year detour to D.C., worked for Senator Kyle as a legislative assistant, worked for former Congressman Matt Salmon, who's running again, ended up as his chief of staff, ran a solar energy trade association before moving back here. I was sort of the cliched person who I intended to be in D.C. for 2 years, 10 years passed, and I was still there. Decided, it was sort of the last train to come back, had a great opportunity at First Solar, did that for a period of time before getting back into the political world as the executive director of the state Republican Party. And in the last 5.5 years, I've been the leader of what I call the Party of Business, the State Chamber of Commerce. And just to drill down a little bit who we are, because there's somewhere between 100 and a gazillion chambers and business organizations in the state, depending how you count it. A lot of great chambers. We work very closely with chambers across the state. The Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, led by my good friend Todd Sanders, is one of the great full-service chambers in the United States of America. They do it all, and they do it all very well. What we do is we focus on policy, policy, policy. We've built a team out where everyone who comes into the chamber, whether they're an intern or to the CEO level, they have an aptitude and a desire to engage in public policy. I won't hire anyone that doesn't enjoy it. And the reason why is because even if you, on a front office position, what I found is if people don't love and understand this area, it's very difficult. It's a very interesting field when you're dealing with political leaders, and when you have people that don't understand that system, it becomes very challenging and frustrating. We've been around since 1974, and I would say that when it comes to moving the meter in public policy, whether it's at the state legislature, with the governor's office, or with our congressional delegation, we have the place very well wired. And this is our mission statement. The Chamber of Commerce is committed to advancing Arizona's competitive position in the global economy by advancing free market policies that stimulate economic growth and prosperity for all Arizonans. The competitive position in the global economy is a very important point. We're no longer just competing with California or New Mexico or even Texas. We're competing for the top jobs with many countries all over the world, whether it's China, Malaysia, India, you name it. And our desire is to make sure that Arizona is certainly desirable in terms of a U.S. destination, but we also have to be mindful. It doesn't do us any good if we're better than Texas, but not quite as good as another international destination. So everything we do, and we'll see a slide a little bit later, is really geared towards improving the state's competitive position. Again, that means great tax policy, great regulatory policy, and great education. So we have the workforce that employers need. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but the education part is, I believe, going to become a more important role of what chambers and business organizations do, in large part because of a lot of the progress we've made in some of the areas like tax policy and regulatory reform. One of the things that we did, and that it came at a great time, as the Great Recession, not so great if you're in a trade association, but as the Great Recession was hitting, we joined forces with what was then known as the Arizona Association of Industries. And that was a trade group representing manufacturers across the state. We joined together with them about 3 or 4 years ago, and what it did, and one of the, and it's an interesting thing because personalities matter. People have been trying to do this for about 10 years, and I came on board with sort of a fresh face and just sort of, sometimes I've learned it's great to be oblivious to things. I remember when I worked for Senator Kyle and I didn't realize that I didn't know anything. I was able to get a lot of stuff accomplished because I had no fear. When I've gotten a little bit older, I realized how tough things are and I think through too many things. So I was in sort of that state of mind where I was looking at the agendas of both organizations, and I said they're sort of identical. I mean, we have different numbers and we have different font sizes, but that's about it. So we were able to get together and through that increase our revenue, increase our voice, and do something that the legislators really like, and that's to help solidify the messages that they get from the quote-unquote business community. It's very confusing for them where they have 20 different groups running around and they're giving 25 different messages. So we've really, in the last several years, by this merger and just working more closely with the Phoenix Chamber, with GPL, with other groups like that, the message has been as united probably as it ever has been, and I'll get to a slide as to why that was so incredibly important to Grand County University, to every company in this state, because about a year and a half ago we were about ready to go over the edge, and I'll talk about that in a second. So we represent virtually every industry, large, small, medium-sized companies across the state. And one of the neat things about that, and one of the things I've really enjoyed, is it's a great way to learn about what's going on in every sector of the economy. And for a lot of complicated issues like workers' compensation, things where different industries have different interests, what we're able to do is at our chamber board, we're able to really come out with a resolution that meets the needs of different industries. So when we go to the legislature, it's not a free-for-all. We're able to say, you know, this is a compromise package that we think that most of the major sectors of Arizona's industries will accept. And this is a picture of our team. I realize I'm getting older now. It's a very youthful, talented team, and everyone's just very passionate about what they do. I don't think I'm giving any state secret. It's good to have people. You know, we heard the dean talk about the school. He loves Grand Canyon University. The people who work at the state chamber, they love public policy. They love the state of Arizona. They want to make the state a better place to live. So this is how we're set up. The guts of it is you don't want to go to the legislature without coming up with very detailed, well thought out policies. And the stronger the policy work is, the stronger the thinking that goes into it, the research, the easier it is to move the merchandise. And what we found over the years, you know, one of the things when I came on, I noticed we had about 120 policies that weren't ordered. It was from send a resolution to Congress saying Arizona is a neat place to live, to reforming our tax system. There was no prioritization. What we've been able to do over the years is we really prioritize. We know what the top priorities are, and we're able to communicate that quite effectively. And then we use all sorts of different ways. Grassroots, we've got a great grassroots partnership with a national DC group called BIPAC. We have a political action committee that helps to make sure that we get the right people into office. I'll talk about that a little bit later. We do a lot of social media. Jenna Miniger, who's here right now, I think she's been tweeting some things, I'm not sure. But that's becoming increasingly important because the media is changing, and the platforms, the way people get their news is changing. But nice glossy covers of magazines, people still love that stuff. Okay, that's never going to change. So it's a little bit, I don't know how many people here watch Law and Order, but there's sort of an element of that to what we do. During the off season, and we're in the off season, so it's sort of a seasonal occupation, what we do. In January to June, sometimes a little bit earlier than June, we're at the legislature. We basically have cots at the legislature, lobbying, moving our bills, killing bad bills. But before we get to that point, from say the end of June to the end of November, we're busy refining our policy agenda, and you know, we've got it's actually expanded. 12, 13, 14, 15 different policy committees from taxation, transportation, education. We're now doing some work on veterans affairs, federal affairs. We get the best experts from government relations, from businesses, to help us sort through and put together these policies. And again, for me, that's one of the neat things. I'm dealing with the best and the brightest and the most knowledgeable people in Arizona. And through that, we're able to put together this annual business agenda. So that's the 2012 And right now, we just had a meeting a couple of days ago where we were discussing some of the initial elements for next year. Developing the policy. One of the things when I came on board, I realized is we didn't have the policy foundation we really needed. One of the things that I miss most about working in Washington, D.C. and working for members of Congress is something called the Congressional Research Service, where you have world-class research on any item you could possibly imagine. That really does not exist in the state of Arizona. There's a variety of, there's no statewide Congressional Research Service. Just as sort of an interesting aside, you may be a little bit surprised, the institutional sort of the cloud knowledge as to what this state has done and where it's going. Does anyone care to reside? Anyone care to guess where that really resides? Lobbyists. Because of term limits, it's not the governor's office, it's not the legislature, it's not even the people who work at the legislature, it's the people in the lobbying community who've been around for 20, 30, 40 years. They're the equivalent of the Congressional Research Service. They're really the only ones I've been able to find in the state that could really go back to the Wayback Machine, particularly when I come up with some different ideas that may not be as bright as I originally thought. Congressional Research Service used to do a great job of checking those bright ideas. For us at the chamber, it's really the lobbyists that have been around for decades, and they're good people. Sometimes lobbyists get a bad rap, but I'll tell you, the core lobbyists that have been doing this for a long time care as much about the state as anyone, and are extremely generous in what they participate in to make this a great state. So our chamber foundation, our senior vice president, Suzanne Taylor, who is the head of the foundation. She's the executive director. What she's been doing, working with this very young guy, Chris McIsaac, who writes all of our research papers, we've been putting together papers on items that we want to advance in the legislative session. And I think going forward next year, we're going to have an increased focus on some of the education stuff and some things on transportation, like I-11, high-speed rail to Tucson, Phoenix, some of those things that are starting to bubble up. So these are, what I'm really proud of, there's a lot of there probably aren't as many foundations and think tanks in the state as there are chambers, but there's quite a bit. And I'll put our foundation with this relatively modest budget against any foundation in the state. So this is a challenge. If anyone else knows of one and wants to call me on this, I'd love to hear it. Where we put out a paper on something, the odds of it moving into law or being a serious policy consideration blows away any other group in town. Net operating loss, law, capital gains, law. I'll also submit that our capital gains paper had the sexiest title in the history of capital gains papers. We called it Unchain the Game. Appeal bonds, public employee pensions. I don't know if how many of you have read today's Arizona Republic. It's worth reading the editorial. Huge issue that we're going to need to tackle next year, and it affects everyone. And the reason being is that it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. The big battle in the world and in the country is this tension between these legacy costs for public employees that do a very important service, no doubt, and funding existing operations. That's the trade-off. That jurisdictions, whether it's Greece, California, Arizona, we're all going to have to decide, and it's not a pretty one. I'll tell you, it's a very difficult issue to deal with. And these are a couple of other things that we dealt with. One of the things I mentioned, the National Association of Manufacturers, we're the state affiliate. One of the things we've done is to really develop good partnerships. We have a great public policy partnership with the Arizona Small Business Association, the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Leah Marquez Peterson, who runs the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, mark my words, a shooting star in the state. She's just terrific. We just engaged a partnership with the Greater Phoenix Black Chamber of Commerce, and we've also been supplying some of the policy work for the Arizona Commerce Authority as well. So one of the things that we do is we all are much better as a state when we're working together. So this isn't the type of thing where we come up with something and say, well, for a competitive reason, I'm going to hold this from Todd Sanders or GPL so we can show how great we are. There's plenty of, the good news is there's plenty of policy work to go around, and we've all really done a good job of working together. The immigration decision from the Supreme Court is a case in point. We did a joint statement with the Phoenix Chamber, Greater Phoenix leadership, Southern Arizona leadership, and a few other groups, and I think that was accepted pretty well. Political Action Committee. When you're dealing with a legislator, again, you want the best possible legislature you can get. I mean, people are only going to move so much once they get in office, and if you get the right legislature, if you get a legislature of terrific people, it makes our job a lot easier. So we just finished an endorsement process. It was very exhaustive, very exhausting. We went through, we interviewed something like 35, 40 candidates running for the legislature, evaluated every incumbent, and just issued about a couple weeks ago all of our endorsements. Endorsements are nice. For most political people, cash is even better. So our Political Action Committee helps to distribute some funds. We're a super PAC, which means we're able to contribute about 4 times as much as a traditional PAC to campaigns. How we get our message out. Very important to flood the zone. Traditional media remains important, but people are changing, particularly younger people are changing the way that they get their news. So we send out a weekly email. Anyone who's interested, we could just go on our website, azchamber.com, and then we'll write pieces. And one of the things, the weekly, we do a weekly column, and it's something I learned from my former boss, John Kyle. He is, for 20 plus years, I believe, has been writing a weekly column about whatever issue he thinks is important for the people of Arizona to have some awareness of in terms of what he's doing in DC. That's a really good thing, in my opinion, because it helps discipline the senator. It's helped discipline us to really communicate each week that key policy item that's going on. And Jen has been doing a great job on our social media. Out of the state chambers, we're #1 in Twitter. We're top 10 in Facebook. And it's just 4, 5, 6 years ago, when we would do events, it was all through mail and stuff like that. Now it's basically over the internet. And I saw, for this series, I saw the emails. It's people have just changed the way that they schedule and calendar events and get their information. And how do we evaluate the effectiveness? You can tell the guy who helped put this together is a Boston Red Sox fan. He will be dealt with severely when I return to the office. We want to put points on the board, and this is, we wrote a column a couple weeks ago, Arizona 2.0. We think we've made more progress in this state than any other state, as far as we can tell, when it comes to getting our budget in order, in terms of restructuring our tax code. If you go back just 3 years, a couple of numbers stand out. Our deficit as a percentage of our general fund was basically worse than any state in the country. There was a point where, as a percentage of our general fund, it was actually worse than, we were in worse shape than California. In terms of jobs lost, we lost over 300,000 jobs. That's over 10% of our workforce. That put us, depending on how you look at it, neck and neck with Michigan, which, as we all know, was hit pretty hard a few years ago with what was going on in the auto industry. And what really impresses me about Governor Brewer and the legislature, they sometimes, it's easy to criticize, although, I have a little bit of a different perspective. Tell me what's been going on in the U.S. Congress for the last 2 or 3 years. You compare what's been going on there or not going on to the work that the legislature and the governor took on, and it's a very favorable comparison. So in addition to closing our structural deficit, Arizona now is actually going to run a modest surplus. We completely reformed our tax and regulatory environment. We have, you'll read daily, there's stories in the papers today about different EPA regulations on greenhouse gases. It's the exact, just whatever you see in the paper on DC, just assume it's the opposite in Arizona. We have a regulatory moratorium on most new regulations in this state. We've been, in a responsible way, we feel, reforming our tax code to reflect that we still have some budgetary challenges, so these tax reforms are phased in. Right now, and I think this, I hope this will have a positive effect for Grand Canyon over time. For the last 2 years, what we've done is that if you're basically an industry that is producing goods or services, the services came this year. If you're producing goods or services in this state, but you're selling most of your stuff out of state, Intel would come to mind, Boeing, Raytheon, no states are really, Arizona, we're not buying missiles. You're not going to be penalized for producing in the state of Arizona. We've created an environment where your corporate income tax structure is about as favorable as it can be, coupled with the fact that we have about the best R&D tax credit in the country. If you're producing a valued good and service, you're selling it outside of the state, you've got a very favorable corporate income tax profile. We've also made some significant progress on the business property taxes. I get a kick out of when people say, well, businesses get all these breaks. I mean, that's not fair. My response is, we'll take equity. I mean, most people don't realize, but the business property tax rate is still about twice as high as the residential property tax rate. Now, I don't complain when I get the residential property tax bill, but it does create some challenges for businesses. And we've been working over the course of really the last 6, 7, 8 years, reducing that disparity. It started at 25%, and when it's fully phased in, it'll go to about 18%. And we had other things last year that were really important. We set up the Arizona Commerce Authority, which is helping to become the center of economic development activity in the state, and working with our great regional economic development organizations like GPEC and TRIO and the organization in Yuma. This is a good model, and it's modeled after what a lot of other states have done. And we've also added some new job tax credits. We've added some. We've restored the job training fund. So we've got some tools in the toolbox. The old Department of Commerce, they used to say if I wanted to punish someone, I would send them there because they would never find their way out. Arizona Commerce Authority, completely different animal. 2012, the landmark part of that is that we reduced, it's a phased-in approach, we're going to be reducing our capital gains rate by 25%. That's a big deal for venture capitalists, and it's the first capital gains tax cut in the state's history, as far as we can tell. I mentioned the net operating loss, the 100% sales factor for service providers. We also doubled the business property tax exemption, and there'll be something on the ballot that will take it from, if it passes, and Farrell Quinlan and NFIB have done a great job of running that would take it from 100, it's now at 50, 60,000. This bill would take it to about 120. I believe the ballot initiative would take it to 2 million, 2.1, something like that. So that'll be on the ballot, and that's been a very big deal for a lot of small businesses. And this was neat. This was at our Manufacturer of the Year event. The governor signed the jobs package that passed this year. Last year's package I called a once-in-a-generation bill. I called this year's bill a once-in-a-generation bill. I never took the Ames test, so I know that there's an issue there with my math. But part of the reason I say that is what we've done on the business taxes, when it's fully phased in, it'll be about using static scoring, it'll be about a $600 million tax cut for businesses. I don't believe that the revenue numbers will look that way. And why is that? When you're incentivizing great jobs, the Intels, the Boeings of the world, they hire human beings, and those human beings have high-wage jobs. And what do? They buy homes and pay property taxes. They buy stuff. They buy cars, so they pay sales tax. They pay income taxes. So when you look at the way we've been trying to tilt our tax code, I think it's going to, I can't say the $600 million will pay for itself, but there's no way that there won't be an increase in other types of tax receipts that aren't captured in the scoring. And in addition to taxes, we've put a lot of time into civil justice reform, into tort reform. We've helped turn the state into one of the better states in the country. Last year, we did some things with appeals bonds. We did something to make it more difficult for the Attorney General to contract out with private attorneys and just get outrageous contingency fees. This year, the big ticket item was really, we were able to get something through that will basically shield companies, manufacturers and service providers and other companies from punitive damages, penalty awards, if they follow applicable state and federal regulation. It's a pretty big national deal. The U.S. Chamber actually came out last Friday to recognize our speaker, Andy Tobin, for his work on this. And Kimberly Yee did a terrific job on getting that bill through. Education, government reform. Again, this is an area, it doesn't get the attention of a lot of the other areas, but extremely important. The state's made a lot of progress in K through 12. We've put in A through F scoring. We've put in more payment structures designed to reward performance. A lot of other things we need to do. Public pension reform, we've done some things around the edges a few years ago. Again, read the Arizona Republic editorial. See, that's going to, I think, really heat up. And the governor's office did a great job in the legislature getting a personnel reform bill through this year. And it wasn't done to penalize employees. Interestingly, really more of the reason behind it is to give supervisors and people working in government a greater ability to hire and reward the higher performing employees, and that passed. Okay, immigration, 1070, big ticket type stuff. There was nothing in 1070, as far as we can tell, that directly affected Arizona business. Why? Because we worked very hard to strip out all that stuff. It was completely stripped out. What we didn't factor in, and I get paid to factor this in, but what we didn't factor in is what the secondary effects would be, how this would look to the rest of the country, the rest of the world. I knew we had something on our hands when I was speaking before a Swedish American Chamber of Commerce event in Scottsdale, Swedish American Chamber, about 100 people, half from Sweden, half from the U.S. I'll be honest, I don't think I understood half of what was being said. And I mentioned, the devil in me mentioned, how many of you are aware of 1070? Every hand went up. And the people from Sweden are like, they were scared because they didn't know what this meant for them. They didn't know what they had to do. And when you're a state like Arizona, where we have 200,000 jobs that rely on tourism, where Mexico is our largest trading partner, responsible for 25 legal Mexican citizens coming to the United States, coming to Arizona, buying our stuff, staying in our hotels, 25,000 jobs. This immigration stuff had to stop. We did not take a position on 1070. At the time, it looked like a law enforcement bill, but it morphed into something else. And we learned from that fair or unfair, we were going to have to unite as a business community and say, enough's enough in Arizona. We've hit the theoretical limit on the state stuff. If we're going to do something in immigration, let's do it where it properly belongs on the federal level. So this is after 1070. So we've done more. We've done the employer sanctions bill. We've done 1070. We've done more than any other state, plus some. You can now make an argument that Alabama went a little bit beyond us. I'm not sure if that's really the case, but we had to decide what we were going to do as a business community. Were we just going to hang around and let these things go through, or were we going to join together? And I know this is an emotional issue and it's a tough issue, but I guarantee if any of those bills got through and were signed, and Major League Baseball will deny this, I think we would have lost the All-Star game and it would have been a run on the bench. And that may be unfair. I think it is unfair, but it doesn't matter. It reminds me of my driving instructor. When I was 16, I was taking driving classes. He would come in with different news reports, and he would say, for these reports, this person didn't do anything wrong. He was driving completely, following the law, driving carefully, but was still killed in an accident. And we would have, if these bills had gotten through, I'm convinced we would have taken a walloping, particularly in the convention and tourism business. We joined together, Michelle Bolton of the Phoenix Chamber and Todd, they did a terrific job. We opposed these things and we killed them. And we had very courageous lawmakers in the legislature. The Senate President Steve Pierce, Adam Driggs, who's an immigration lawyer. Republicans did this is a very, very tough issue in a Republican primary, and they stood up. We killed them, and the state's better off for it. And so, here we are, 2012, June. It's a dry heat. It's not too bad. we've made a lot of progress. This is a big deal. We're now one of the top 10 states for business for Chief Executive Magazine in 2012. That doesn't happen without these policy changes. #1 most entrepreneurial state. And I give my friend Don Carden of the Arizona Commerce Authority a lot of credit for the work he's put together with the Innovation Challenge and some of the other programs at the Commerce Authority that are really focused on small business. Real quick, the challenges of the job. We've got a board of directors of over 90 people. It might sound like a lot to you. When I took the helm of the chamber, we had about 35 committed board members. I thought that was a little bit crazy. One of the first events I attended was with the head of the Oklahoma Chamber, pound for pound, maybe the best chamber in the country. I said, you know, his name's Dick Rush. I said, Dick, this is crazy. How am I going to manage a board of 35, 40 people? He said, listen, young man, a little younger than, you're thinking about this the wrong way. The companies that get involved, they're going to want a seat at the table. You're going to have to grow that board. He was at 160 board members at that point. They're now at 200. And we're now 90 and growing. And it works. What happens is your executive committee and your officers tend to play more of sort of the managerial type oversight role. In terms of challenges, you know, it's not, we don't do the networking that a lot of the chambers do. It's not as tangible a product in some ways. It's in some sense a public good, and it's a coalition of the willing. But you know, one of the few business books I wouldn't say one of the few, but one of the best business books I've read, you know, is the Jim Collins Good to Great. You shouldn't do anything if you can't be the best at it. And you know, public policy is what we do well. It's what we love, and that, as long as I'm at the chamber, that's going to be our focus. A lot of other interesting things out there, and we're always looking for partnerships and affiliations that help us advance our mission of helping to draw the community together, but the focus on public policy is going to remain our key. And you know, setting the Arizona Chamber apart from other business groups, you know, it's a challenge. There's a lot of different other groups out there, but again, the model we have is we're going to be the best game in town when it comes to public policy, and if we're not the best game in town, they should shut us down. And you know, normal HR issues. One of the challenges I've had is we recruit great people, and then they get to exposure before 90, particularly on our board, 90 terrific companies, and sometimes the companies like to pick off our people because they have deeper pockets than I do, and they help fund me, so it's tough for me to get too upset. But it's, you know, I've done a few different things in the course of my career. That's a good thing. I mean, I look at the people we bring on board. I want their market cap to grow. It's a great day when they come in and I can't afford them because they've reached a level that results in them leaving. And I think it's a lot better than saying to the board, look, this is great. I mean, everyone I hire, no one would ever want to hire any of these people. This is, you know, they'll be here for 30 years. You know, so it's a better problem. And I can tell you right now, the two people sitting in the front office, Gretchen and Jenna, their market cap is going up as I'm speaking. But that's great. You know, we try to put all of our information on our website, azchamber.com, for people interested. Just if you go to the website, you can sign up for our emails, our weekly column, and we'd love to get you engaged. And you can follow us on social media, attend our events. We'd love for you to become a member and join one of our policy committees and help us advance the positive agenda of this state. And before I close and take questions, you know, this really gets to, it's one of my favorite quotes, it gets to why we do what we do. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And you know, for businesses, it's just very, very important to be engaged. Chambers are a great way to do it. Trade associations are a great way to do it. And you know, we consider it a privilege to have a chance to, day in, day out, work to advance the competitive position of the great state of Arizona. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here at the hospitality of Grand Canyon Magazine, Grand Canyon University, and my favorite magazine, Arizona Business. You guys, you all really do a terrific job and make the state a better place. Thank you.